Good afternoon, everyone. It's Brett Caviness with the Caviness Group at Compass. I am live. Today, we're coming at you live on Zoom as well as on Facebook. So wherever you're joining me, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited about the topic. Today, we're talking about, and I'm going to be sharing exactly the strategies that I use with my buyers to make sure that when they're buying properties here in Silicon Valley, that they're not overpaying. We're in such a super competitive market. We want to make sure that obviously we're doing everything we can to get into a property without overpaying. And sometimes that can be hard to know and be a fine line on where exactly we're at. So I want you to, throughout this process, throw in your questions. You can add questions here. I'll try to get to those at the end of this video. You can do that on Facebook or here on Zoom. I want you also to know that this is being recorded. So if you are missing it or you want to see it again, I will have it on YouTube. Visit my YouTube channel, find this video there after we're done here today, as well as lots of other videos and other content there. So again, add your questions and I'll be happy to get to those as we get going. So without further ado, let's get on with it and start talking about how to get you into a home without overpaying. So for those of you, I know most of you, I think you're already familiar with me, so I won't spend too much time. Again, I'm Brett Caviness with the Caviness Group at Compass, based in Menlo Park, California. I've been helping you guys get into properties for over the last 10 years. And the most exciting part is when we're able to do that at an exceptional price, where you're excited to get into your new home and get on to the next adventure of your life. Our mission is to help everyone find their place in this world, and we know at the time when you're buying a home, it can be very stressful. For our job is definitely to take on all the stress that we can and make things just as smooth as possible. So today, again, I'm going to be sharing exactly the process that I use when I'm working with my clients to make sure that we're not overpaying as we get them towards success over the finish line of buying a home here in Silicon Valley, and what exactly that looks like. Of course, everything we're talking about here, we only have a maximum of 30 minutes today, so I'm going to run through some things. It's going to be very abbreviated, but we're definitely going to fill you in on kind of the big chunks that you need to know in order to get into contract safely and at the right price. The big things we're going to focus on today is the search process. Everything we're going to talk about is really leading up to making sure that we're going to be able to get into the property without overpaying. So it starts from the beginning with the search process. I want you guys to understand price and pricing. We're going to talk about the cost of contingencies and what that means, the danger of competition, and how to try to stay away from competition whenever possible to make sure that your offer stands out or is the only one, which is a really great scenario. And of course, how are we preparing that winning offer to make sure that you're the one that gets your offer accepted without overpaying? And we're going to talk briefly about the power of people, because what we know is homes don't sell themselves, people do, and people are the ones buying and selling them. So there's a lot of emotions going into this process. So how can we, kind of try to control everything as much we can throughout this journey? So first, it all starts with the search process. So the first thing we're doing, you're obviously always going to start the process meeting with your agent, really going over your wants, your needs, your goals. As your realtor, I want to understand exactly what you're trying to get out of this process, and that's very different for everyone. So it's a good place to start. You want to have your pre-approval process completed once you're ready to get out there and start taking a look at properties, because you want to be prepared. What I found is sometimes it can take several weeks or months to find the right house, and sometimes it can take a few hours. Once we get a search started, you might find the perfect place that you want to move on, and you want to be prepared. Being prepared definitely starts with that pre-approval, having that ready to go so you know exactly how much you can afford. And what I find from my clients' experience is that a lot of time that pre-approval process is really enlightening, and you often find that, gosh, your budget that you'd be comfortable with is actually quite a bit higher than you might have realized, or maybe it's actually significantly lower than you realize, and we want to make sure we account for that as we're getting out there and searching for properties. We want to focus on homes, and the way that we can do that in terms of the right price is by, let's look at homes actually that have sold. So this is an exercise I go through with my clients right away. Before we ever go out and start looking at properties that are for sale, I want to actually show clients properties that have sold in their price point most recently, so that you can really get a good perspective and a good feel for what you can get for your money. because we know things that have sold very, very recently are going to be indicative of what we can expect to find going forward. It's always best if you can narrow in on a specific community. I find it's very confusing and very challenging when clients are looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 cities or areas or counties in their search. That can make things much more challenging. When we narrow in, we can be much more focused, be able to kind of track pricing and metrics a lot easier and help you be successful faster. Again, so that's when we track homes, we can see what they sold for, and again, get a good feel for where things are in terms of price as we go. Also, what we're trying to do is identify homes that generally meet your needs and get rid of the ones that don't. So it's always good to have a running list of properties, trying to scan out the ones that are aren't a good fit and keep the ones that are a good fit. And kind of, again, the idea is always narrowing down in on that search. Doing due diligence. So once you find and identify a property that you've been interested in or you think you'd like to pursue, in our market, what happens is you're going to do your due diligence before we make an offer and before we ever decide that we're going to make an offer. And what does that look like? Usually what that means is we're reviewing disclosures. Usually disclosures are reports and inspections that a seller had a third party do for you. And it's really to allow you to have as much information as possible. And we use that information when we're structuring our price and our offer and our terms. So again, in Silicon Valley, it's actually a real benefit for buyers that we have a lot of information before we ever even get to the point of making an offer. And so that way my buyers normally feel very confident when they're going into an offer situation. They really understand a lot of the costs, changes, upgrades, things that might need to happen to that property before we even get to the offer time. What I always encourage buyers to do is let's try to get all your questions that you have answered before, again, we make that offer. We want to make sure that anything you might be thinking of in terms of maybe renovation changes, maybe you want to expand the property in the future, maybe you want to add an in-law unit, all those sorts of things. You might need to go to the city, the county, find out if that's possible, have a good understanding, again, before we ever get to the offer table. That way you have a good understanding. We can make a clean offer and move forward quickly, because when you have a full, clear understanding of what direction you're going and we can make a clean offer, that's going to give the seller the confidence that you know what you're doing and that you're prepared to move forward in a smooth transaction and get us to close of escrow in a really smooth way. Now we're going to talk about understanding price. This is one of my favorite topics, especially in Silicon Valley, because pricing can be very, very wacky. If you've seen anything or you know anything about our Silicon Valley market, you know that sometimes prices are super, super low. Properties are listed at a super attractive price and they sell way over. Sometimes properties sit on the market for a long time after being priced really high. And it's really, really hard in the beginning to understand, especially as a new buyer, where is this house even going to sell? And what price can I expect to pay for it at a market value? So we're going to talk about understanding price. And where does price come from? Well, really the starting point with price is called price per square foot. And what does that mean? Well, what that means is if you take purchase price or market value of a property and divide out the square footage of that house, you get a price per square foot. And that's really a benchmark starting point when we're talking about evaluating property. We want to look at kind of the average price per square foot of similar homes in the similar marketplace. Let's apply that to the property that you're interested in. And then let's do some plus and minusing based on location, style, features, benefits, or upgrades that it needs. So those are going to be factored in from that kind of relative starting price per square foot to help us get to where we think maybe the market value is. So it's really important to really understand a community's average price per square foot. Once we understand that, then you're going to have a much clearer lens when you're out there looking at property. I'm going to show you exactly how to be looking at properties. I always tell my clients, don't even really worry about the list price. Don't even look at list prices too much. Start by looking at the price per square foot. Let's look at the square footage, and then we already can very quickly usually understand at least a good kind of sense or a good range in terms of where we expect that property might sell for. Again, all based on the price per square foot. So let's look at a little example here. Let's say your budget for the purchase of a home is $1.3 million, and you're looking online on the internet. And again, like I said before, if we're narrowed in on a neighborhood or a specific area, then we have a clear picture at what that average price per square foot is for that area. And we can concentrate on understanding what that means and how that might impact pricing. But if we're looking at many, many areas and they all have varying average price per square foot, it can be difficult for us all to determine where we expect the value is for that property. So when we narrow in, let's say we're looking at one neighborhood, and let's say that neighborhood average price per square foot is $1,000 per square foot. So you're looking on the internet and you see 2 homes listed for sale. Again, let's think of it, your budget is 1.3 million. One home is listed for 1.2 million. And you're thinking, wow, that's a really great deal because my budget is 1.3. This home is listed for $100,000 below my budget and it's in a great neighborhood. That seems great. And it's 1,500 square feet. Well, what does that tell us? Well, that tells us that it's actually now it's listed at about $800 per square foot. And what do we know above the average price per square foot for the neighborhood is $1,000 a square foot. So that instantly tells us, without knowing anything else, that there's a very good chance that this property is what we would call underpriced or maybe a teaser price. So that list price is really just part of a marketing strategy that seller and that listing agent put into place to try to get a lot of interest for a property. So they listed it at a very low price to get many people interested to likely make offers significantly over. So again, we can see when a property is listed way below the average price per square foot for a neighborhood, and let's say it's in generally good condition, normally that's a really good leading indicator that we could expect that property to sell significantly over. So again, if we applied that average price per square foot at $1,000 a square foot, maybe this is even nicer of a home than the average, at 1,500 square feet, that means we're expecting a sales price really around the $1.5 million range. So that would be way over your budget. So not even worth bothering taking a look at, going out, risking, putting on the mask and the gloves to go preview property. It's just not worth it because very quickly we can understand that probably it's going to sell significantly out of budget. Versus, let's look at home B, listed for $1.6 million. Maybe it's been on the market for about 60 or 90 days, and it's also 1,500 square feet. Well, that house then is listed for just a hair over $1,000 a square foot at $1,066 a square foot. So it's actually priced a little bit higher than the average, listed at 1.6. So what does that tell us at 1,500 square feet? Well, that tells us that maybe the price is a little bit high. Again, still likely significantly out of your ideal budget of 1.3, but maybe this house would sell somewhere between 1.5 to 1.6 million dollars based on the condition and other factors. So again, obviously you might not be looking at this anyways because it's priced at 1.6. But if your budget was higher, maybe your budget's 1.5. Maybe you'd be looking at something at 1.6. It's been on the market for a while. If it's priced, higher per square foot, there might be some room for negotiation. So again, just showing the importance of price per square foot when it comes to evaluating likely sales price. So the difference in pricing here in Silicon Valley, again, here's a few news stories. Homes selling for $1 million over the list price. How does that happen? Well, that happens when properties are listed way below their market value. And normally, again, it's a tool, it's a strategy. Agents know what they're doing. Sellers know what they're doing. They're really creating an auction marketplace when they're doing that. So we see that quite often marketed. A property sold $500,000 over list price. Well, that's because it was listed $500,000 below the likely market value. So that's called teaser pricing. And usually that's kind of clear to identify when we know an average price per square foot. When we see something listed way below the average for the neighborhood, it's normally a teaser price. Versus pricing at market, that's where we see properties that are priced more closely to where we would expect their value to be. And now that we've been in the shelter in place kind of environment, coronavirus world, I'm seeing a trend towards pricing a little bit more close to market because we're not expecting, the huge traffic at open houses, lots of activity, tons of multiple offers. Now the idea is actually let's limit the number of people seeing homes by as much as possible. So before it was priced really low, have dozens and dozens of people at open houses on the weekend and sell for higher. Now the idea is more often it's priced around market price, have maybe a few buyers go to private showings with their agents to comply with county regulations, and then have the home sell maybe with 1 or 2 offers at that market value. So the dynamics have definitely changed, and I have seen the dynamics shift a little bit more towards pricing towards market value. In more of the most affordable price points in Silicon Valley, so around $1 million to maybe $1.5 million, we are still seeing, the strong demand in that price category. So still we're seeing a little bit of teaser pricing and properties still selling with multiple offers significantly over the list price. But again, normally we can identify that before we get too far down the road. Let's talk about contingencies and the cost of contingencies. First of all, what is a contingency? So a contingency would be something like a financing contingency. It's a period of time that you have as a buyer to get something done. It could be an appraisal contingency. It could be a property investigation contingency. That would be the time that you've asked for the seller that you have to complete your buyer investigations, to complete your financing investigation from your lender or an appraisal. Normally in Silicon Valley, I would say 9 times out of 10, buyers are buying properties without contingencies. So that means once you're in contract, there's really no way out. But now we are seeing more contingencies coming out there because there are a little bit less pool of buyers. So we're seeing some sellers that are actually considering offers with contingencies on specific properties. But there is a value of a sure thing. We're going to talk about what that means for a seller. We're going to talk about peace of mind. We're also going to be discussing whether or not it's a risk worth taking for a buyer in terms of including contingencies. And then cash offers. So I want to just briefly touch on cash offers because it's kind of always a concern that buyers have. Am I going to be competing against cash offers? And what does that mean? Well, a seller will sometimes take a slightly lower price, only a slightly lower price, to take a cash offer, likely with no contingencies, because it's a sure thing. It's peace of mind for that seller. They would rather do that than take your offer with a contingency where maybe it's going to fall out of contract. They'll take a cash offer that's slightly less. However, here's the kind of value of a contingency. If you're a buyer and you want a contingency and you need it to include it, you might have to pay more. So if you're able to pay significantly more than that cash offer or another offer without contingencies, a buyer or seller may wait for you if the offer is that much better than the next offer. Again, so you're really going to need to pay for that contingency. If you want the seller to wait for you, you're going to need to pay for that value for them to take that risk to wait for you in the process. You can think of this in the seller's perspective. If they're taking an offer with a contingency, now they're risking that transaction falling out of contract. They might have to go back to the market. It's going to take more time. Now they're carrying their mortgage for a longer period of time. Maybe they're trying to move on. So it's just a more risky kind of transaction for them. It may be possible if there is a contingency, they're going to have to expect that the buyer, you might be coming back trying to renegotiate and get that price down lower later. And so they're going to be nervous about that. And also it puts their plans on hold. Whatever their next plans are with the sale of their home, obviously they're selling for a reason. If you have a contingency, that puts all of their plans on hold also for that period until you've removed your contingency, then they would have the confidence to move forward. So for them, there is a value of a sure thing. So a lot of times a seller will take a slightly lower price that has no contingencies or maybe a cash offer rather than waiting on a buyer with financing or a financing contingency or other contingencies. So for them, a lot of times I see sellers, if it's just a $10,000 difference or $5,000 difference, they would rather not wait for you. They would take a little bit less money because they're hedging the risk of future renegotiations later. But for you as a buyer, what does it mean? Again, it means maybe you'll have to pay a slightly higher price in order to have the contingency, but it gives you more time to make a decision. And that could be valuable to you. Money can be valuable in lots of different ways. Part of that could be time and energy. And if it gives you the confidence to move forward and make a smart decision, then it could absolutely be worth paying a little bit more. You could have time to get more questions answered, to do more due diligence on the property. It may give you an opportunity to cancel the contract for different reasons, depending on what contingencies you have. Maybe you need to sell your home. I'm seeing that more now. It was very rare to see sellers accept an offer from a buyer contingent on that buyer selling their home. Now we're seeing that more. Sellers are being a little bit more cooperative, giving the buyer time to sell their home. So it frees you up. You don't have to buy this property if you're not able to sell your house. So it takes away some of that risk. And again, you might rather pay a little bit more on the house that you're buying, have a contingency, and be protected and able to cancel that contract if you're not able to sell the house that you have. So again, it might be worthwhile to have that contingency. So it may protect you from future financial losses in different ways. By paying a little bit more now, it might be protecting you in the long run. So those are definitely things to consider, and every scenario is different. The dangers of competition. You know, who has leverage? That's always the question when we're going in and preparing to submit an offer. Multiple offers can be an advantage to the seller. Obviously, if they have several offers to consider, they could play those against each other. Again, then you're kind of in an auction mentality or almost an auction situation at that point, where maybe several parties are almost going back and forth, what would seem like maybe bidding each other up. I hate using that term because it's not really bidding that happens, but sometimes, you know, multiple offers do mean a seller can play those off of each other to get up to a higher price, versus when there's just one offer, that can definitely be advantage to a buyer. If there's only one offer, a seller is more apt to consider it because they don't have anything else to consider. So it's definitely a stronger position for a buyer to be in if you're an only offer. Days on market, something to look out for. If you're a buyer, higher days on market, so that means a property's been listed for sale for a longer period of time. And most clients are worried, is there an issue with the house? And normally the answer is no. Normally the answer is no, it's just listed higher. Again, maybe average price per square foot, it's higher than most. And so that's why it's been sitting on the market longer. And those are usually opportunities. So I always recommend my buyers look for things that have been sitting on the market longer, especially if you want to have a contingency, as we talked about before. Those may be sellers that are actually going to be considering your contingency because they don't have anything else at this point. They've been sitting around with no other offers. So now could be a great time to make an offer below the list price with contingencies, and you have a very much more leveraged opportunity at that point. Now let's talk about preparing a winning offer and exactly what that looks like to get us up to bat again, to make sure we're in a good position to get into contract without overpaying. So when I'm preparing a winning offer, it's really about assembling an incredible offer package with everything done, buttoned up, in place. That way when the seller sees everything, they know that this is a strong offer. It's clean, it's clear, it's crisp. There's going to be no issues because everything is already done up front. All they need to do is sign off, and we're moving towards close of escrow. So my job as your agent is to really put you in a position where you look great. It's not my job just to sell homes. I have to sell you as a buyer to the listing agent and to the sellers to make sure that they feel like they want to work with us, and to instill confidence in them that we're the ones that are going to close the transaction. So when we're putting an offer together, there's many, many things that go into it. So you're looking at actually what my offer presentation looks like. And I can tell you, I've been selling real estate, again, for over 10 years now. I haven't seen any other agent ever bring me an offer that looks as amazing as my offer presentation does when I'm presenting it to a listing agent. So what does it look like? We've got a cover sheet. We've got a personal note. So I'm requesting, I tell my buyers whenever possible, let's write a love letter to the sellers, tell them why you want it so much and why it's perfect for them. Then we're going to have your pre-approval letter from your lender. Again, we talked about that step already. They can see you're pre-approved. The lenders looked at everything. We're ready to go. Financing is solid. Then behind that, we've got proof of your funds, because the seller's thinking, show me the money. You're telling me you want to have the house, but where are the funds? So we're going to include a screenshot of your bank accounts or bank statements, things like that are going to show them, look, we're telling you we've got the money. It's sitting right here in the bank. We're ready to go. All we need to do is transfer it over. Then we're going to have a purchase agreement where everything is signed, sealed, delivered, buttoned up perfectly. All the boxes are checked. The dates are correct. Everything is ready to go, and it's clean and clear. Then behind that, we're going to have all of that kind of disclosure package. We're going to have all those signed off. That way the seller knows that we've seen those. You as a buyer, you've read them, you've reviewed them, you've received them, and you're okay with them. So you're going to acknowledge all of those in your signed disclosure package so that seller, again, knows you've seen everything. There's not going to be any surprises down the road, and we're good to go. We're confident to move forward. So again, what does all of that mean for a seller? When they look at an offer package, they're going to be looking at, let's say they've got 5 offers on a property, and they're looking at several of these, and they've got our wonderful, beautiful, clean, clear, concise offer package. I can tell you on the listing side, that listing agent is going to be telling the seller, look, we've got 5 offers. This agent brought us everything. Brett's offer has everything signed, sealed. It's all signed off. Brett has a great reputation. It's all put together here, and they've already signed all the disclosures. Maybe there's no contingencies, and it's a pretty good price. Even if it's not the best price, I know that Brett's going to get this deal done. So that puts us in a little bit of a better competitive edge and a better position to get you into contract. Again, how much to offer? How do we figure out what price to go in at? Well, we're going to be analyzing together the recently sold homes. We're looking back to see, what properties have sold for. We're also analyzing homes that are on the market today. because what we're really looking at is what you can get for your money. If you're not able to buy this property, what else could you go and buy? And we're factoring that into the price. We're also, again, because we had all those disclosures, reports, and inspections done in advance, we've already taken into account any repairs, maybe termite work that needs to be done, if we're including contingencies, maybe how many days on the market this has been out there. We're taking all that into account and factoring that in on our price. And again, making that part of our purchase process. We're understanding the competition. Normally, I'm able to talk with the listing agent and understand if there are multiple offers, if there are any other offers at what point. We can get a kind of better understanding on what the situation looks like. And then our goal is always to attempt to land around the top of the offer pack. So I always tell my clients, especially if you'd be okay walking away from this property, let's not overshoot the price. Let's go in at a price that we think would be reasonable and desirable from the perspective of the comparable sales that we've seen and everything else that we've seen. Let's make sure that we're at least at the top of the pack so that we're going to be considered. And more often than not, what we find is that then the listing agent is giving me a call and they'll tell me, Brett, you know what, you guys weren't the highest offer, but we really like it and I like you. So if your clients want it, they're going to need to adjust by about this much, or they'll give me a good sense or a good idea on where we need to go in order to get the property for you. And that really comes down to the power of people. Again, homes don't sell themselves. Buyers are buying property. It's an emotional process. And we as agents are there to help you through that and get us through the finish line in a successful way. What does that look like? So I just pulled an actual email out of my inbox here just from just last month, where you can see here that a listing agent was telling me that they actually picked our offer because they knew about my reputation. I hadn't worked with this agent before, but they had heard of me and had known that I do a great job and do a really good job with my clients to make sure we get us to the finish line. And so again, agents are going to be making those recommendations to the seller, especially when there's multiple offers. An agent's going to tell the seller, look, Mr. Seller, I know Brett. I know he does a great job. And look, the clients have their pre-approval proof of funds. They might be offering a little bit less, but if you take Brett's offer, there's no question we're going to close escrow. He's never had an issue. I've never had an issue with him. We're going to get you to the finish line. Or we have this offer from an agent from all the way in Southern California, never heard of her before. Half of her boxes weren't checked. They didn't sign any of the disclosures. I have no idea. I've never heard of her name or her company before. That seems really risky to me, but they're offering $10,000 more. Do you want to take that risk and end up being back on the market? Or should we go with this clean, clear offer from a great, reputable agent? And normally we find that they'll give me a call again and they'll say, Brett, we really want to work with you. Here's what you need to do. Remove that contingency, make this adjustment. Can you edit these dates? They're going to come back to me and see if they can work with me before going to an agent with a terrible reputation. So again, that's the power of people when it comes to real estate. And again, it's really a relationship business, because the home buying and selling process is very, very stressful. So sellers are looking for a smooth transaction. And the way that they're going to get that is by, again, having a great offer that's put together and having confidence in the agent that's representing that buyer. So again, what you're doing as a consumer, as a buyer, is you're really assembling a winning team, and that's where we come in to help you. We want to make sure, we're pulling in your lender and everybody, the title, escrow, the other parties, you as the buyer, we're pulling everybody in to work as part of a team. Again, to try to make sure that, let's see if we can squeeze into first place to get you the property versus blowing through it. We don't want you paying $25, $50, $100,000 more than you needed to. Let's just squeeze into first position based on relationships, based on knowing that we're going to be the ones to get the deal done for you. So very fast, very high level overview, but that's just some of the ways that I am working to make sure that you're never overpaying for property. Of course, when you're buying a home, you're always going to be usually, not always actually, but usually the person who's paying the highest price. But let's make sure that that's only by a tiny bit, not by a huge margin. So I hope today you're taking away how to narrow in on your search, really a better perspective on understanding pricing. Now you know that contingencies have value and there might be a price to pay for including those contingencies. Maybe you know a little bit more about how to avoid competition. Let's look at properties that have been on the market longer, especially if you need to include contingencies. Now you know how I'm structuring your offer together and what we're doing in advance in terms of due diligence to put together that winning offer, and the power of people as we all work together to get you to the finish line of buying your new home. Again, I am Brett Caviness with the Caviness Group at Compass. I'm always available to assist you. I want you to feel free, reach out to me. and contact me for questions that you have, because again, this scenario, all these scenarios are always going to be different depending on your particular situation, but I'd love to have the opportunity to converse with you, figure out a winning strategy for you to get you into your new property here in Silicon Valley. So visit me online at cavinessgroup.com. Check me out on my YouTube channel, subscribe, check out other great videos, tips, and ideas that I have for homeowners, whether you're buying or selling. I've got great information content there. I hope everyone's doing okay. I'm going to check here, see if I have any general questions right now. If you haven't already, thrown them into the box here, either on Facebook or on Zoom, so that I could address those. Let's see here. Do you think prices will decrease at the end of this year? Somebody asked me on Facebook. Well, that's a great question. What we're seeing right now is really price stability. Normally in April, we see significant gains from the month before in our spring market. So right now we're actually seeing pretty stable prices. And depending on the city and the market, we're seeing slight declines. And I'm really expecting that that kind of trend is going to continue throughout the year. I'm expecting kind of stability in our market, not significant increases in prices. In some pockets, especially in the high end, I am expecting maybe continued pressure downward on prices, just because demand is a little bit less. So we're seeing that in kind of the 3 to 4 million plus market, a little bit more inventory and a little bit more pressure on prices downward, but still in that around 2 million or below 2 million mark, still super, super competitive. So we're still seeing a lot of demand. And I think that's going to continue throughout the year, especially as people are getting more and more confident. I have to tell you, in the last kind of 2 weeks, lots of buyers are now ready to start out, get out there and view properties. We're able to put on masks, two people at a time can go into properties. We're sanitizing, we're taking all precautions that we can, but people are ready to get out there and buy homes. So I'm seeing that people are ready to get active again, make offers, and continue with the market. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. Again, we're at the time mark here. I don't want to take any more time. I thank you guys so much. Again, this will be sent out, so if you miss it, feel free to check it out. I'm Brett Caviness with the Caviness Group at Compass, and I hope everyone stays well and has a fantastic weekend. Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon.